Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another session of Cyber Conversations. I'm Kanti. I'm the director for Cyber Institute. I'm joined today by Abigail. She is one of our cyber leaders who's actually fantastic at developing content for different cybersecurity curriculum. And we are joined by a special guest today, Camille Singleton. Camille has 17 years of professional experience in cybersecurity topics, both in the US government and at IBM. She is conversant on a range of topics which affect the cyber threat landscape, including industry-specific analysis, multifactor authentication, ransomware, destructive malware, and phishing trends. She has published multiple articles addressing pressing cybersecurity topics, ranging from threats to operational technology and vulnerability management to PowerShell-based attacks and trends in ransomware. Camille has appeared as a speaker at Think, RSA 365, the Australian Cyber Conference, and multiple WiCyS events, and she has authored several white papers, including Combating Destructive Malware, Lessons from the Front Lines, and the 2021 and 2022 IBM Security X-Force Threat Intelligence Index. She has 2 master's degrees, one from Oxford University and another from George Mason University, lending academic depth to her analysis to complement her professional experience. Since late 2021, Camille has been managing the tech team in the X-Force cyber range at IBM, where organizations can experience a cyber crisis simulation and test their response plan for a critical cyber event. Camille, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so glad to have you on Cyber Conversations. The floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Kanti. And thank you for that very kind introduction. And I really am honored to be here today. I know you've had these conversations with so many amazing women before me, and it means so much that you've asked me to come and join in one of these discussions as well. So thank you so much for that. I do have some slides to share. And so let me see if I can get this to work. Let's see. So I'm gonna be honest. I think we probably should have tested this ahead of time because I think it's gonna. All right. So just so you know where I plan to go in this presentation today, I wanted to start out with a brief synopsis of my career journey, including a discussion of what my job entails today, as Cyber has recommended that I discuss. But then I'd also like to talk about some lessons learned that I have had along the way in my career, sharing a few stories from my career journey that have been instructive for me and hopefully will be instructive for you as well. And 3 main lessons that I want to talk about in particular are that first, if you feel like you are failing, you can reassure yourself that failure is not forever, that you still can recover and rise and be successful. Second is that sometimes you have to forge your own way in your career. You have to create your own path for yourself. But at other times, your path is going to find you. And I think it's important to be open to both of those options. And then third is that you should create a climate where you can succeed. Sometimes the perfect job, the perfect position, the perfect work climate is going to be set up for you. But especially as a woman in cyber or a woman in the tech field, I sense that a lot of times we need to forge this for ourselves. So we'll be delving into each of these a little more in the coming slides. So first, a little about my career journey. So maybe this doesn't count, but I kind of consider my career journey to have started with my first internship, which was at the State Department at their training school for foreign service officers in Arlington, Virginia. I was a senior in college, and for that internship, I worked for the Area Studies Department. So this is the department that taught the foreign service officers about the culture, history, and politics of the area of the world that they would be deploying to, all while they were immersed in intense language training. And it was great. I would attend and help with the classes. I helped to write a self-study guide. I was able to attend seminars around town as well. And ultimately, I wanted to work for the Foreign Service. And I had been studying political science and was about to graduate with a political science degree. I took the Foreign Service exam, and every Saturday during that internship, I was applying for positions at the State Department. Tons of positions, mostly civil servants positions, many of which you didn't even need more than a high school degree. But for some reason, I never heard back from any of them. But one Saturday that I had set aside to apply for State Department jobs, I decided to look at CIA's website instead. And they had this analyst position that looked really interesting, exactly the type of thing I wanted to do, meaning research and writing. So I put in an application, assuming that I would probably never hear back. But then I did. They contacted me and they wanted me to submit a writing sample. So I wrote a short article and I sent in a research paper I'd been working on. But again, I didn't really expect to hear back. But then I did. They contacted me again and they wanted me to come in for an interview at some random office building in Northern Virginia. And I remember coming out of that interview thinking, I was super rambly. I was just kind of all over the place. I'll give it maybe a 40% chance that they'll offer me a job. But then they did. They offered me the job. And of course, I had to fill out tons of paperwork. I had to fly back to Washington, D.C. for a series of exams and a polygraph and wait for about a year for it all to go through. But somehow I made it. So when I first arrived at CIA, they put me on the military analysis team, and they asked me to analyze Russian military space systems. So satellites, space launch vehicles, anti-satellite weapons, all these things, which I knew nothing about coming in. And it was all very technical, but I learned as I went. And over time, I found it absolutely fascinating. And then after a couple of years, they asked me to focus on Russian military cyber, which again, I knew nothing about, but I learned as I went. I had some great members, some great mentors, and I became the Russian military cyber expert for my office within a couple of years. So that's really how I broke into cyber. I kind of stumbled into it. I was asked to work on that topic and decided to run with it. And by accepting and embracing that challenge, it has absolutely changed my life. And working at CIA was great. I absolutely loved it. I came in thinking I would just be someone's little research assistant, but no, you're given a portfolio, an area of expertise. And if something crazy happens in that area and the president of the United States of America needs to know about it, you are the one writing about it. So that was pretty amazing. So I was at CIA for 12 years, covering Russian cyber threats for most of that time. And during my last year at CIA, I was a manager leading a branch of analysts looking at emerging technical threats. And I really enjoyed that as well. And then in August 2017, I became a mom. And I took a little break. And to be honest, I wasn't sure whether I was going to go back. I was taking things one day at a time. But a few months into my maternity leave, an old colleague of mine from CIA reached out and asked whether I would be interested in working at IBM. And he said I could work remotely from home, which as a mom, it really is great having that flexibility. So we decided to change things up, me and my husband. I applied for and got this job at IBM doing strategic cyber threat intelligence work and started working from home. I no longer live in the DC area. Now I live closer to my and my husband's families. And I feel like I get to see and spend time with my family all the time. I will admit that the sense of mission at IBM is not quite the same as in the government. So it's not the same sort of altruistic, we are here to protect national security and the people of our country. At IBM, we do help protect companies and work with a lot of different companies to help them improve their cybersecurity posture. But ultimately, the main goal in the private sector is to make money. And that's just a little different from the goals in the public sector. But that doesn't mean we don't do really cool things at IBM. So let me chat about that for a minute. What my day-to-day looks like at IBM. This is kind of a career progression of where I've been, and IBM is on the far right. So right now I'm a manager. I manage the Adversary investigations and analysis team within IBM X-Force Threat Intelligence. This is a job I took on May 1st, so it's still relatively new to me. But both on my team now and previously when I was an intelligence analyst, we researched cyber threats that might affect IBM clients and then wrote about those threats and published them in blogs or in reports for a specific client. And we would often brief our findings as well. And one blog that my team recently published was this one titled Ex-Conti and Fin7 Actors Collaborate with New Backdoor. And this was about a new piece of malware that we found threat actors using. And the fun thing about finding a new piece of malware is that you get to name it. So we decided to name this one Minodo. It's a derivative of the word domino. And then another research project I've been pretty involved in is the X-Force Threat Intelligence Index. So this is our yearly report that takes a broad look at the major trends we are seeing in the cyber threat landscape based on billions of data points we collect throughout the year. So I was the lead author of this report in 2021 and 2022, and the 2023 report was taken on by some of my colleagues, and they did a really great job. They totally knocked it out of the park this year. And just to give you an idea of some other projects I've worked on, the very first blog I published at IBM, and really this is the first blog I ever published openly since everything I wrote at CIA was classified, right? So this one was about cybersecurity at the World Cup, what you should know. And this was a ton of fun to research and write. And then I also worked on a white paper on destructive malware and how it was on the rise back in 2019. And then I also published a blog in September 2020 about ransomware attacks. And apparently this blog is being used in the SANS Cyber Threat Intelligence training course right now. So many people have told me that, although I'm not quite sure what's so special about it, but that's kind of fun. So research, uncovering these interesting insights about cyber threats and then sharing those with the broader community is really what the IBM X-Force Threat Intelligence team is all about. Okay, so I've taken up a little bit of time talking about my career journey, but I also wanted to touch on some lessons learned that hopefully will be helpful for you right now, wherever you are in your education or even thoughts of pursuing a career, and lessons that can hopefully be helpful to you in the future as well. And the first lesson is that if you feel like you are failing, reassure yourself that failure is not forever and you can still rise. So when I worked at CIA, at one point in time, I decided I wanted to switch from the military team to the foreign policy team because it was a little more interesting to me. I thought I would be more engaged over there. Well, the pace of work on the foreign policy team was a lot faster, and I was soon drowning in a million emails a day, and it seemed to me like everyone else on the team was more capable than me. And not long after I joined the team, I got a new boss who had sky-high expectations, which was really tough. And in that position, I had so many papers die. So many research projects I worked so hard on, papers that I wrote and rewrote again, and just could never seem to get it quite right, to get it quite like my boss had wanted. Longer papers that I spent months and months and months on that were killed for what seemed to me like no good reason. And it was just a really tough time and a tough position to be in. And I absolutely felt like a failure. And I remember talking to my roommate about this one evening, how I never felt like I was going to be able to succeed at my job. And she gave me what I thought was really good advice, that things wouldn't be like this forever, that I had succeeded in the past and that I would succeed again. And that just because it seemed like I was failing now, this was actually an opportunity to learn and grow. And eventually this season would pass. And you know, it did. The change mostly came because I went back to the military team. I got a new boss. All of a sudden, I didn't have a writing problem anymore. But my big takeaway here really was that failure is not forever. You can still rise. You can be more than you are now. You can improve. And my career has had many high points since that low one, even though at the time I felt like all was lost and that I would never measure up. So a second lesson I have learned is that sometimes you have to forge your own way, but at the same time, it's also good to be open to your path finding you. So my last year at CIA, I was a manager and I loved it. I had thought long and hard about going into management before I did it, and I knew it was what I wanted to do. I love helping people identify what they do well and really capitalizing on their strengths and building a positive team climate and culture. So when I came to IBM, really, that's what I still wanted to do. Ideally, I wanted to pick my career up where I had left off and continue it forward, but the position they had open here was an analyst position, not a management position. So I was fine with that. And I enjoyed being an analyst again, but the truth was I really did want to get back into management. So I started looking for positions, applying for positions, talking to my managers, looking and applying, but it was hard. And I think the truth is there really aren't that many threat intelligence management positions out there in the private sector. So I ended up taking a management position for the X-Force Cyber Range tech team, where we put organizations through a simulated cyber crisis and teach them how to effectively respond. That was an awesome experience, really fabulous team. I loved that. But then in February of this year, they reorganized that team, which ended up organizing me out of a job. So I was just kind of floating around for a couple of months and applying and interviewing for jobs again, but just the right opportunity wasn't coming up. And then totally out of the blue, my manager let me know that he was going to split one of the threat intelligence teams and wanted me to take over one of the teams. So basically, he was handing me on a silver platter everything I had wanted career-wise for the past 5 years. And all the applying for jobs, interviewing, researching for opportunities, networking, in essence, everything I felt I could do that was within my power could not compensate for me simply being in the right place at the right time and an opportunity being handed to me. And I can make the same argument for how I originally came to IBM as well. So I think it's good to do the hard work to find your career path, but sometimes your career path will find you. And it can be life-changing to be willing to take advantage of those opportunities when they come, even if they're not entirely what you had in mind. And then a third and last lesson I have learned is that you need to create a climate where you can succeed. When I first joined CIA, I joined a team that was full of men in their 50s. There were a lot of beards, a lot of round bellies. I think all of them were old enough to be my dad. And there was only one other woman on the team, but she was on maternity leave at the time that I joined. So my guess was that I was put on that team for diversity. And the truth is, in the information security community, in cybersecurity, as a woman, you are likely to be in the minority. And often when you are a minority, you have to put forth extra effort to make sure you are in an environment where you can thrive. And some things I found helpful were encouraging positive behavior. So there was a lot of swearing on my military team at CIA, a lot of dropping the F-bomb all the time. And I had to let my team know I didn't think that was professional and I didn't really appreciate it. And I also found that joining women's groups and doing lunch with other women was so beneficial. It was such a breath of fresh air compared to the environment I was in and day out. And sometimes in some situations, I think it is absolutely warranted to recognize when you're in an unhealthy situation and to get out. In some organizations, cultures can form that focus more on ego, more on putting others down, and less on inclusion, empathy, and mutual support for colleagues. And I have several friends who, after attempts to positively influence the culture, have concluded that the best thing for them to do was leave and seek out another office where the climate was more conducive to their success. So that's something to consider as well. So I realize I've talked a bit up to this point, and I would love to hear some questions and have a discussion as well. And so I'll just wrap up with some concluding remarks, reiterating again some of the lessons I have learned in my career, that failure is not forever, that you can overcome and become better and learn from mistakes and difficult periods in your life or in your career. That sometimes you do have to forge your own way and make sure you take your career where you want it to go. But accept that just as important as that is recognizing that your path may very well find you, and that you should be flexible in taking those opportunities as they arise. And last, that you have to create a climate where you can succeed. Maybe that climate will automatically be there, but especially if you are a woman in a woman minority, chances are you'll have to take some sort of action to make sure that climate is there for you. And from there, I would love to answer some questions, have a discussion. And I know you guys have some great questions prepared.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating for me to listen to because so I'm not a very very technical person. I'm more of this, softer side of cyber kind of person. I love everything cyber. I'm absolutely fascinated by pen testing and all of that stuff, but I don't have the skill set to do it, but I'll watch if somebody else is doing it. So what you just said was very fascinating to me on many, many levels. So like you had said, oh, please go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and if I can, I personally feel like those softer skills of cyber that are so necessary and so critical are something that we as women excel at. So for example, tracking cyber threat actors from a more human perspective, like where do they live? What do they do? What do they like? And understanding cyber threat actors from that perspective, and even tracking their Bitcoin wallets. I know there's evidence out there that women are very good at tracking Bitcoin wallets, and it's because we're so analytical and interested in that human side of people, which can open up insights into exactly what's going on and connections and relationships. So I definitely lean into that. I think those softer skills can be such a strength and are so needed to combat cyber threats as well.
They are. And most people, when we talk about cyber, they only focus on the very technical aspect of it. Yes, that's important. But like you said, the softer skills are equally as important as the technical. I mean, great that you have the ability to, pen test and create a new product, but you also need to be able to rely on your logical, analytical thinking and, problem solving skills. So.
Absolutely agreed.
We do have some questions prepared for you, based off your talk and the bio and everything. So you've worked both with the government and the private industries, right? So how did your experience with the government and IBM contribute to your knowledge and understanding of cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I feel like the government did a great job of teaching me how to be a threat intelligence analyst. And there's a lot of those skills that are easily transferable over to the private sector. So I know when I started at IBM, I was a little nervous. I was thinking, am I going to have the skill set required to succeed here? And, is it going to be totally different? But the truth was, once I got into the day-to-day, I was like, oh, yeah, I've done this all day, every day for the past 12 years. I totally know what I'm doing, piece of cake. It really wasn't that hard. And it was nice to see that so many of those skills are transferable. So, and an interesting part about the government as well is that it takes a long time for them to hire people, especially where I was working. It's a long security clearance process. And so once people are in the door, they really want to capitalize on them, use them. They put you where they need you, as opposed to firing and hiring new people, because that's very costly for them. So you noticed in my narrative, I talked about how they asked me to do Russian military space because they needed someone, and they asked me to do Russian military cyber because they needed someone. And so I think that's a great opportunity to develop new skills as well. And I do wonder if that's something the private sector could do better as well, teaching people, training people. We hear about the cyber skills gap, but the other side of the cyber skills gap is that there's this huge void of really trained, really capable, really experienced people, these unicorns that all of these companies are looking for. Whereas if they would hire more entry-level people and let them learn and grow and train them, then they would be able to fill their gap. So hopefully private companies will eventually come around to that hard truth. I think in the meantime, more people are getting hired and trained, but the truth is the skills gap is there, and it's still hard for people to find jobs because expectations are too high. And they think we need to hire the right person instead of we need to train the right person.
That is so true. I mean, you look at jobs, even for entry-level positions, they ask that you have this amount of experience already, but they're not willing to hire people because they don't have experience. It's like a vicious cycle. And what you just said, I absolutely love it, right? Hire the people, let them learn the ropes, let them figure out where their expertise, where their skill set lies, and then train them based off of that. That's fantastic. I wonder how long it will take people to realize that, though.
Hopefully sooner rather than later. We'll see. But I
Yeah.
have also found anyone who struggles getting in the door to a cyber job, just keep being persistent, keep putting in applications, keep knocking on doors, keep at it. Because I have seen so many people feel kind of despondent that they're not getting in, but eventually they do. Eventually they do get in. So just keep at it. You'll get that entry level position. You'll get experience. You'll be able to build on that. And eventually you're going to be that amazing unicorn that they were looking for to begin with, right? You're going to get there.
So true. So you have a very varied background. So how did your education background in Russian, Central European, East European, and Eurasian studies, as well as public policy analysis, contribute to your career in cybersecurity?
Yeah. So let's be honest, I didn't wake up when I was in 5th grade and say, I want to be a cyber threat intelligence analyst, and frankly, most of my colleagues, most of my teammates were all in the same boat. I don't know any of us who as a young child knew we were going to go into this field. I think it's just that the world needs cyber threat defenders. Cyber threat intelligence analysts, incident responders, SOC analysts, the world needs them. And so I think it's good to serve where you're needed, right? And the market opens up these opportunities. And I know so many people who have found great opportunities and career growth in cyber, even though it wasn't what they were planning on. So I got a degree in political science with a minor in economics, and that got me into CIA. And even while I was at CIA, I went back and got 2 masters. One was in public policy, the other was in Russian and East European studies. None of those are cyber, right? Maybe one day I will go get a 3rd master's in cybersecurity. So we'll see. But for the most part, I've just had on-the-job training. So those degrees have helped me to think critically and write well and brief well and know how to research and study. And all of those skills are directly applicable to my job today. And then the more technical skills I've learned on the job. And there's a lot of great training out there that you can avail yourself as well. So there's a lot of different pathways that you can go through, but I do feel like strong critical thinking is critical no matter where you are, no matter what job you're doing.
And that's so important, not just in work, but even in life, right? Anything you do, you need that logical skill, you need that analytical skill. I always, whenever people ask me, I tell them I don't have the background that facilitates you to think for yourself, focus on problem solving skills or critical thinking skills. Because when I was in college, I have a bachelor's in computer science and engineering, which I'm not a big fan of, by the way, because I can't code. I don't have the skill to think for myself and do it. Because when I was in college, we were just given the code. They would just put it on the board and say, hey, write this, see what the program does. But instead of saying that, if they had said, okay, figure out how to solve this problem, how do you, get the result of so and so, would have been much better. So critical thinking skills, I think most of the time they should develop a little earlier, when you're like 7th grade and go from there into high school. So you still have the talent, you still have the ability to think about that as you go along in your college life and even beyond. Think.
Agreed.
Abigail?
So in your current role as a manager of the Advisory Investigations and Analysis team, what are some of the most important responsibilities you have in supporting the X-Force incident response team?
Yeah, so in my team, we are focused very closely on looking at adversaries, so cyber threat malicious actors, and tracking them, naming them, identifying their tactics, techniques, and procedures, the malware that they use, and being the experts on these groups and what they do and what they're likely to do next when we see them in a client's environment. So we do work very closely with the X-Force incident response team. And that's one of our main duties, providing support for the incident response team. And I think some of the most important things we do are just having a body of knowledge, be continually researching, continually getting smart on these actors, writing papers, writing threat group profiles so that we have intelligence at the ready when a client's critical moment comes, and we can just hand that over and make sure that we're continually curating that new intelligence to be ready. Second is also to be responsive. So the incident response team is worldwide, and they have a follow the sun 24/7 approach. And we try to keep up with that. Our team is more primarily based in the US. And so, but the way we set things up, we also have a bit of a follow the sun approach as well. And so, so just being flexible and being responsive and recognizing when a crisis is there, jumping in to help when you can. So I think those are the two main things, constantly curating, being ready, and being responsive when the time comes.
So you have mentioned in the PowerPoint and even just now about research and writing in papers. So you've written many publications about ransomware as well. So what are some key trends or developments that you've observed in that specific area?
Yeah, ransomware is fascinating. I know it's also the bane of most cyber defenders' existence and has been for the past 5 or so years. But I do think ransomware trends are fascinating. And one thing that's really interesting to me that comes out in our latest threat intelligence index is that there's kind of been a downturn in ransomware. So, and I'm reluctant to say that, we're about to see the end of ransomware. All our ransomware problems are over. It's not going to be an issue anymore. But I do wonder if threat actors are changing their tactics and their techniques, and ransomware is just not as safe and profitable as it once was. So 2021 was a rough year for ransomware actors. There were a lot of arrests, and law enforcement in multiple countries have really cracked down on ransomware actors in the past 2 years. And I think it's just more costly to be a ransomware actor today than it was 2 or 3 years ago. It's riskier, and you might have friends who have been arrested. And so we see ransomware attacks going down. In addition, I think defenders are getting better. They're finding ransomware actors before they can deploy ransomware. They're finding them when they lay back doors at some of the earlier stages of attacks. So that's good news for defenders. And that's also making it harder for ransomware actors. So they're having to adjust. I think their income is going down. I think there might be some ransomware actors even exiting the scene. There were tons that joined the scene 2 years ago. But another thing I'm seeing is that extortion, not necessarily ransomware, but extortion is kind of the new thing. So holding something for ransom and trying to get money for it is still going to be a thing, but it might not always be data encryption, actual ransomware where that happens. So we are seeing ransomware actors who don't do ransomware anymore. They just steal data and they say, give us money or we're going to leak your data. So no ransomware involved, just data theft and threats to leak that data. And ransomware actors might find that that is actually better business for them, and they don't risk shutting down Colonial Pipeline and, shutting off gas supplies for the entire US East Coast and angering a lot of people. So I'm interested to see if that's the way we see things go. I don't think we have enough evidence to say anything confidently yet, but I do feel like we're seeing a little bit of an inflection point in terms of what's happening in the ransomware landscape.
So you mentioned that you've written several white papers. Can you provide an example of your favorite one that you wrote or co-wrote? And then how does it contribute to the understanding and combating a specific cybersecurity threat?
Yeah, so I think one of my favorite white papers was the destructive malware one. So this is one that came out in 2019. We wrote it because the X-Force incident response team was seeing a lot more malware incidents. Several of these were in the Middle East. Oil companies in the Middle East tend to be a common target of destructive malware attacks. So that was part of the 2019 uptick. But there were some other incidents as well. So we wrote about this uptick in destructive malware. And to me, that's kind of the worst thing that can happen to you from a cyber threat perspective, right? Someone totally wipes out your computer. You have to replace all your hardware, start over from ground zero. You just lose everything. And sometimes ransomware can act like that. But then we were thinking about doing a reprise in 2020, 2021, but destructive malware went quiet. And it was at the point where I was thinking, should we write a paper? Where has all the destructive malware gone? Like, why did everything go down? But then 2022 rolled around and Russia invaded Ukraine and the floodgates opened. We have seen so much destructive malware related to the Russia-Ukraine crisis, tons and tons of strains. A lot of them seem to be quickly thrown together. All the threat groups who were behind destructive malware, they've had lots of opportunity to really hone what they do and get better at conducting destructive attacks. So the good news is we haven't seen any breakouts like NotPetya, where some sort of destructive malware goes viral worldwide and shuts down corporations and shipping ports and everything, pharmaceutical manufacturing and everything in between. So we haven't seen that, but we have seen a lot of destructive malware. So it's no longer a question, where has the destructive malware gone? We know where it is right now. It's all going in Ukraine, but I'm really interested to see what that landscape looks like going forward as well, and how people get better and better at defending against that and recovering quickly.
Awesome. So, you've been in cybersecurity for a while now. So what do you think are the most important qualities of a successful cybersecurity professional, and how can someone develop them? For example, how can a young student, someone in the 8th grade or the 9th grade, how can they develop those qualities?
Yeah, so I might be a little biased. I do feel like the most important qualities are soft skills. So your ability to work well with other people, to collaborate, to take feedback, to admit when you're wrong, and to problem solve. All of these things are extremely important. And of course, the hard skills are important as well. Whatever it is, to be good at it, to be a good coder, to be good at tracking a cyber threat actor and meticulous about that, to be good at pulling in data from multiple data sources and identifying broad trends in the cyber threat landscape, whatever it is, to be the best you can be. And personally, I do think women are just as good as men at those hard skills, just as good. And test scores show that math and science, we perform just as well. But I think one weakness might be that sometimes we doubt ourselves, which might cause other people to doubt us as well. When the truth is, we're very capable. And I think the key to pushing through that is just to believe in yourself, have healthy self-talk. Tell yourself you're doing a good job, you're doing great, you're going to succeed, and surround yourself with people who also believe in you, and so you can push through and be on top. So I don't think it's a matter of men are smarter than women in this field, and that's why there's more men in cybersecurity. So I think it's just a matter of creating an environment that is healthy for women and is supportive, and where people believe in women and give them that encouragement that they need, especially because we can have a tendency to self-doubt ourselves. So I know I listed a few things there. Hopefully some of them answer your question. But yeah, lots of opportunity.
That is so true. I was just talking to someone else this morning about the same thing. You know, we have a tendency to not credit or take credit for our tasks, or even, you know, fully say, okay, you know, I may not know exactly how to do this, this, and this, but I'm still going to try, you know, I'm still going to take a chance and see what happens. We're very self-doubting. It happens a lot.
So
It's just,
but I would argue that at times that can be an advantage. So people who have a large ego and just want to throw that ego around, and they're most important about themselves and looking smart, that can be their downfall, and it can lead to suboptimal outcomes. You don't actually solve the problem. You don't actually find the answer. You don't actually find the solution because people are too worried about themselves. And so I've heard that women are good at ego suppression. Having a lot of practice with ego suppression can really be advantageous in a lot of different circumstances. So I don't think we need to beat ourselves up and say, oh, we're approaching this wrong, but really recognize what our strengths are and where we excel and lean into those strengths.
especially if you're working with a team, the one you just said, ego suppression, you know, you can bring down anybody. And we know that there are people like that in all teams, you know, the one that says, oh, I know everything. You just got to do what I'm telling you because I know everything. I know how to do this, this, and that. So, well, we won't take up too much of your time, but I want to wrap up the session with one last question for you. What advice do you have? I mean, you gave us 3 pieces of great advice, but specifically toward young folks, what kind of advice would you give them, you know, when they're following their path in cyber?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 main things that I've already mentioned that I would reemphasize. One is believing in yourself, right? I feel like as a woman, we just kind of need to remind ourselves of that, and believing in other women as well, because we all need it, and we can help each other in that area, you know, and understanding. So believe that you can do this. You can be successful in cyber. You can break into this field, and you can make a difference. You can have a positive influence, and believe that that's true. And the second thing is to be open to opportunities that you might not expect. So my career is totally not anything I would have imagined. You know, I think in 5th grade, I wanted to be a brain surgeon. That's what I had decided upon, right? But my life path has gone a totally different direction, but I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for all the opportunities that have opened to me. I'm so grateful for where I am today, for the people I've been able to work with, for the problems I'm able to solve, for the situation I'm in right now. And I wouldn't be here if I hadn't been open and flexible to taking those opportunities when they came. You know, I didn't think I was going to get that job at CIA, but I took it when that opportunity came. And I had never thought about looking at the space program, but I took that opportunity when it came, and same with cyber. And I had never thought about working at IBM, but I took advantage of that opportunity when it came. And I'm so grateful that I did. I'm so grateful I took a chance on those things. And so other people will recognize what you do well, and they might reach out to you and provide you with opportunities, and being willing to accept those when they come, I think can be really powerful.
That is some fantastic advice. Thank you, Camille. And again, thank you so much for being here with us on Cyber Conversations today. We greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you both for having me. This has been such a pleasure.